It's all good. All right,
That's
we
great.
are live, and we were in the middle of a discussion. And so, how about we finish that, Matt? But before we finish, tell us who you are.
Hey, I'm Matt Webb. I'm the group head of digital for Lab Group. My background is in enterprise global platforms, predominantly in the MarTech stack. I've done my time putting in monoliths around the world, building teams around the world, but I spend a lot of my time now educating C-suites and marketing teams and sort of mid-management upwards on the art of the Mac and Composable. So that's why I'm talking to you today.
All right, and we already have somebody saying hi. Hey, Ben, what's up? Thank you for sending us a lovely comment. So, as we were just talking, we just continued talking. So, anyways, this is the Composable Without Compromise stream, where we basically interview people like Matt who are in the space, understanding the thing, and are also able to talk about it. So it's not purely technical. And so that's why we're here today. And what I tend to do in these streams is we started off with a little bit of agency news to, get the things flowing. And Matt, feel free to actually comment on any of those that you find here. So let's start with that. Once we're done, we'll dive into the main event, basically. So today in industry news, we actually have a really cool thing where the MACH Alliance came up with a manifesto for gender equality. And they had a lovely event, and I think it was in Spain, right? In Madrid.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and a few of my colleagues were there, and it was a really, really cool event. And with that, they actually came up with this manifesto. And so I think it's important. And Matt, you just told me that you showed this to your daughter. This is so cool. Can you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm quite passionate about this. This is something that I think when you look like me and you sound like me and you're the age of
Here I
me,
am.
you don't kind of want to be part of the problem. And I think there's a lot of people who are in our kind of camp that are part of the problem. So I
Yeah.
was just kind of proud of this moment, proud to be part of this organization, and particularly the work they're doing with gender equality in the MACH Alliance. So it was just a really cool thing. Like, it was one of those share over the dinner table. I got an 11-year-old who's just sort of thinking about life and what she wants to do, and it was just a really cool thing to share.
Yeah, exactly. I really, really love this thing. So on to the next. And so there's this new thing coming out that we call DXC. Right. Most people that watch this might know what DXP is, right? Which is a digital experience platform. But a platform is not really what's solving the problems here at the moment in the Mac world, because a platform kind of wants you to be all in one, encompassing and then connecting the things together. And where you have DXC is actually doing similar things, but having these connections very loosely coupled and allowing marketers to do a lot more easy things, to make pages or to do stuff with data and stuff. And so I thought, why not post a blog post here that kind of explains it in the eyes of how a marketer or content editor would be happy with that. So, Matt, have you heard about this DXC thing yet?
I have, and it's been an interesting term because there's a bit of controversy around using another set of acronyms.
Oh, yeah.
But to be honest, it feels like I mean, again, we're going to talk about it now, but it feels like it's a good time to start explaining this again. I think there's been a lot of acronyms that have promised a lot in
Yep.
the past, and I quite like this. I think this is going to work for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree. I'm fully in that camp. And because of that, oh, before I go to that, let's go to this one first. Because in the Mac Alliance, there's a ton of different companies in there, from agencies that build projects, but also from startups, like where I work, for example. And all of these have jobs. And even in time of recession, this thing is booming. And so the Mac Alliance actually created a page with the whole job board for all the members. And I thought it would be worth actually sharing this. Like, if you are looking for a job, this is a nice place to go because it teaches you who is in the alliance, what they do, but also what kind of jobs they're looking for. And then lastly, this is actually a little bit of a plug into this DXC thing again, because where I work at Uniform, this is kind of what we serve, right? We're building a thing that actually does DXC. And with that in mind, to kind of help people understand what this thing is from both business side, but also tech, I actually came up with a newsletter in which I will share like news and learning articles about DXC. And I'm trying to define what it is inside this newsletter because it's still so new. And perhaps once we go into the actual talk with Matt here today, we will learn all the basics, right? And then maybe where DXC fits towards the end. Let's see if we get there, Matt. But before we jump in, we have one thing that we both kind of liked. And because Matt and I both come from agency, and we dealt with a lot of really smart people, both in agencies, but also on the client side, and or maybe even at partners, right? And the talent density that we're dealing with, that with people that move around, that now go to like mid-market and up-market places that are starting to build really cool things, is the talent density is huge now. It's amazing. And so, Matt, what is your opinion here?
I again, this is something that I talk a lot about. I was really lucky to be part of a sort of large WPP organization as a global CTO for that kind of organization. And I would spend most of my time with C-suites and middle managers trying to explain to them what this amazing technology can do. And it was always really hard because I wasn't really ever talking to my peers at that level. I was talking to people who are either a little bit stuck in their ways, if I'm honest, or had just heard about sort of this tech but didn't really understand it. What we're seeing now, and especially over the last 5 years, is this huge shift where a lot of senior people and experienced people that come from the agency side have gone into vendors, they've gone into clients. Conversations are a lot easier now. I'll also say agencies can't get away with pulling the wool over their eyes of their clients anymore, which is a great thing for our industry. And I'm just seeing this kind of interesting shift. There's a lot of honesty and in those conversations now. It's exciting times.
Yeah, and I really like that because these people are going to, let's say, either vendors or maybe even the clients that we used to deal with. They are now doing their own homework. They're learning a lot about what they might like or what they don't like. So now when you are working at a vendor and you used to be able to just sell because of your name, that's not really flying anymore. You kind of just have to deal with people who did their homework and had the same job as you before, perhaps.
Yeah, I
And
think
it makes, sorry, yeah, go on.
on exactly that point on the agency side, it's actually really cool now to see those kind of clients want to build their own teams and it not be a threat. So back in the day, if you heard that your client was building a technical team or a UX team or an experience team, it would be a threat. Whereas now it's like, well, they can build their bit of it, and we can either do this the kind of high value strategy stuff and the augmentation as well, and it all fits together without a fight.
Exactly, because it's composable. It's puzzle pieces. You can actually kind of divide and conquer, which probably fits really well in whatever Matt wants to talk about. That was
This
a
is
fun bridge. That
this
happened.
is why this is why you're the professional at this stuff.
Oh
So
boy, here we go. All right, so what are you
yeah.
going to talk about today, Matt?
So what I've done is I've brought a collection of the types of topics that I've mentioned on this kind of chat now, but the slightly softer side to selling and explaining composable technology. I'm a great believer in the mindset of how you approach technology projects. I was a
Yep.
believer in this even in the Monolith days, but I have to say it's far more important now in the composable sort of age. Especially with people, as I say, on the client side, understanding this world. It's really around how they run their team. So I think what I want to do today is just take you through, and I'd love it if you chip in, Tim, and just kind of comment on these slides, because this is a collection of slides we've used for a couple of events. We've used them in front of clients, and it's really to address this idea that you don't have to be a full-on techie to understand this stuff. You don't have to have an old school IT mentality in order to run the kind of program management. And also, I want to kind of demystify some of the scary elements that people think of when they think of composable. So that's what it is. It's a loose collection of slides to chat about. Again, if anybody wants to speak to me about it, then they can afterwards.
Nice. All right. I like the fact that you're talking about the scary bits, because it can be very daunting to say, okay, I have this huge stack. It's very complex because I have a big business and it has some legacy and some new stuff. And now I have to do this other thing again because my boss has FOMO, right?
Yeah.
You kind of like, now what? I might want to do this job for 2 years. I'm going to make my life hard or not? Like these are the conversations we're still having. Imagine that. And
Yeah,
so,
exactly. I think the other thing just to kind of point out, and I've deliberately omitted some of the kind of really nerdy slides. But one of the things when we talk to say CIOs and CTOs, they're already running their teams in a way that can handle composable technology. So they already probably have microservices teams and things like that.
Yeah.
So there is a kind of a whole presentation to do around it's just the next evolution of microservices. But I think for this one, what I was going to do is just rattle you through. I think, you've already introduced me. I was just going to say that obviously I have to declare my allegiances to the MACH Alliance. So
there we go.
Whilst I'm the kind of group head of digital for Lab Group, I was on the tech council actually with you, Tim, for the first 2 years of the MACH Alliance, and I'm still an ambassador at the MACH Alliance. So if I sound like I drank all the Kool-Aid, it's because I drank all the Kool-Aid.
Well, you did. Same for me.
Yeah. So let's just get into this. So sorry, Tim, I can hear my own voice back.
Oh yeah, let me just put my screen down a bit. My audio better now.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So the kind of interesting intersection of time now is we're at a place where, and you just called it out because of the kind of DXC thing. We're at a place now where I won't use it, but you could almost argue that the term best of breed is a viable conversation, right? So we don't use that because it's been so tarnished, but we talk about the kind of MACH maturity. So all the products that are there, not necessarily all the ones that are in the MACH Alliance, but that all of that kind of world that exists to integrate. And if you tie that to composable mindset, you build yourself this kind of opportunity to potentially never re-platform again. So that's really what we're kind of talking about. Tim, I know that you've kind of heard me talk about this 1,000 times, so apologies, but our flavor in Lab is to talk about flexibility as a strategy. And that's 3 things. Feel free to steal this. It's not necessarily a Lab thing. It's something that we preach to other people to hope that they adopt. And that is having a technical platform or infrastructure or architecture that allows for any scale of change, having the confidence to change. So knowing that if you were to change something in that, it's not going to break everything. But then the focus of this kind of conversation, which is having that kind of mindset and being organized as an organization to be flexible. So knowing that your teams can handle the rapid pace of change, the multi-vendors, the ability to spin up different products and run innovation projects alongside your kind of big kind of main show. So that's the kind of 3 pillars that we adhere to. I think it's worth, just for the people that have tuned in, just to remind them that when we talk about MACH, we're talking about quite a technical acronym. So we're talking about microservices, APIs, cloud, and headless. Tim and I can probably talk for a few centuries on that architecture.
It's just they all mean something else every week, right?
Yeah. I guess the important thing is that a lot of this technology has been around for a long time. So if you look at microservices, it's been around from the 70s. APIs have been around for a very long time. Cloud has been pretty much a big part of our lives since the mid 2000s, and actually it goes back a lot further. And headless again goes back about 10 years, but you can trace its history right back. So this isn't something that everybody should go, oh, that's the next new thing. It's just an acronym that describes a collection of technologies. So apologies for the tech nerd out, but I just thought it was worth mentioning. So Tim, are you okay if I share the really ugly slide that explains the differences between MACH and Monolith? Are you prepared for this?
Almost. Because before you go there, I have a question on flexibility. Because you were just sharing that whole thing about how flexibility is so important. And do you actually have customers that want that flexibility? Because in my experience, up until a few years ago, because I'm no longer at an agency, it was so hard to get anything done that thinking of flexibility is like miles ahead. They just want to get the thing live. Like flexibility didn't really count as much, even with the huge clients we both worked for, because it was just hard to do. Has that recently changed?
I don't think it's recently changed. I think it's been changing. The 2 things that I think are driving it, number one, and I'm sorry to use the word, and it's all, I think the environmental factors. I think COVID really shook a lot of our industry up. Look at that massive rise in e-commerce that's currently plateauing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Look at the way that people had to adapt. They knew that any change in environmental circumstances, and there are huge businesses that took advantages, and there are huge businesses that went out of business because of environmental changes. So I think the world learned a lesson, or the Marcom and technology world learned a lesson. I think if I'm being really honest, the second thing is choice. So this availability of all of the cool things you can do now. In our kind of event this week, one of the chaps that we had up on stage, ex kind of Superdry and ex Whitbread, he's a really smart chap, and he said something really interesting about the kind of choice, and one of the factors there is this kind of importance of really sticking to what your core KPIs are, not your micro KPIs. So you've got a lot of people talking about the massive range of flexibility. You've got the massive range of interoperability, and that brings about a massive amount of choice. So flexibility, yes, but it comes with the caveat of don't focus on the minutiae. And I think that was a good thing.
Yeah, I'll have some opinions down the road, but let's go to that fantastic slide. I'm waiting for it.
It's just that I've been beaten up for this slide since you know
Oh, really?
it existed, because as you can tell, my Google Slides and PowerPoint skills are not great.
As a front-end developer, I just don't like the spacings, because why they're not the same? Right? These kind of things is what you're going to get.
I changed them just before this. So I guess the way that we describe this, and this is where if I'm talking to a non-technical audience, it's really important to show this to explain the sort of credibility behind how these things are fitted together, but very quickly move on. But just for the sake of argument, on the left-hand side is really a kind of traditional stack. So there's all different ways of showing this, but really what we're talking about is the front of your stack is the desktop, the mobile, the app, the tablet, those types of things. Generally, the rendering for how they're pushed out is controlled by the monolith. That monolith could be any number of well-known global organizations that provide web publishing content. So I can't probably ought not to mention any names now, but I think most of us know who the big kind of five are.
Yeah.
They usually handle the tagging, the tracking, they usually handle the code, they usually have some sort of custom logic in there, they usually handle the editing, the workflow, the content hierarchy. They sometimes have this ability to plug in their own e-commerce and also their own data. They then usually do integrate. And whilst these solutions have been brilliant, and I started kind of putting them in 2002, right? So we started to use these things a long time ago, and they've been brilliant. The problem now is that everybody's looking at them and saying, well, why would I pick this one thing to do all of these disparate jobs in this whole world of different expectations and different customer needs? Historically, and again, you and I have found this when working on projects together, is you find it very difficult to integrate with a lot of these tools. They say they integrate, but they don't. So what we say now is on the right hand side is what we would talk about a composable or a MACH stack. So this is where, and very deliberately, there are more front-end endpoints on this slide, because with more flexibility around the products that serve that front end, we're able to add more things as and when they come about without them necessarily needing a huge platform update to say, can you do me a PDF rendering front end, or can you do me this version of a desktop, or can you do me this version of an app endpoint? What the other important thing, without going into all of the weeds of this, is underneath how all these things are integrated is this idea that you can go to different vendors to tie these things together, right? So if you really need if you have a particular search and merch need, or a particular e-com need, or a particular content management needs, these are things that you can now go to a vendor that does this very particularly. And we've got examples of vendors that we love because they're so easy to set up. We love some of the search vendors that are out there. We love some of the content management systems that are out there. And we can now pick, and again, I'm going to use it probably for the second and last time, this idea of best of breed. I think just to kind of nod to Uniform for a second, one of the advantages we've got with customers who are worried about how they all stitch together is we can use platforms like solutions like Uniform that kind of tie them all together. And then they feel a little bit more like it's less of a jump from the monolith to a set of disparate services. So there is that halfway house, but for the sake of the diagram, it's about pick what's right for your business and piece it together.
And what's interesting here is, and I've only recently learned this, even though I've been working with this stuff for a long time, is I'm a developer, right? I come at it from a production standpoint. And to me, what it tends to look like is I'm just going to build the best website for the end user, no matter what. That's always been my approach to it. And all the technologies you have, how you organize your teams, the whole thing. And then recently I saw this very interesting live stream where people said, hey, we moved away from the monolith to this whole composable thing. And I looked at the website. It wasn't that good. And I didn't get it. And then what I realized through some cheeky questions that I asked, as in, is this the website you built? And they're like really proudly said, yes, of course. And what they learned is that the internal processes of IT teams and tech teams and agency tech actually changed completely from where you have a monolith where people said, like the boss would say, I need a wish list this Christmas. I know we don't have it yet, but just build it for me. And then you're like, oh, but it's already October. That's never going to happen, right? And they moved from that discussion, which is always a fail for everybody, to you want it this week or next, right? That's a very different discussion that you have on the client side or at the agency side, because there's this extra magic here that you have flexibility of what you choose, how you do it, all the things. And so even if you then still build a crappy thing on the front end, you have completely changed the narrative. And I think that's a pretty important part here as well.
That 100% it. I think the other part to this is when you've got a particular problem on an existing solution and you wish that you didn't have to deal with, and again, just going back to the legacy world, that's just how the workflow works in the system, or that's just how it's going to, I mean, I pick on search quite a lot because you remember the days when it used to be 2 weeks just to set up an initial kind of solar search or setting up kind of Lucene. It was horrendous. And it was never right the first time. It was always a kind of refactoring process, which basically
very complicated,
right
performance-wise even.
Yeah, exactly. And now we're in a world where you can just swap it out. So I
did a search index the other day in 5 minutes. 10,000 items, everything indexed exactly how I want. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And the thing is, we sort of feel like we're sort of either cheating a bit or not being truthful. But I definitely think the more people who see this and see the benefits definitely question why they would go to the same vendor. On this, again, don't laugh. This slide's been around for a long time. So this is if you're talking to an audience, and if anybody's watching this and they just need a way of representing this to their teams, this is the one we use. So we talk about, if your monolith is this huge RV that you've paid a lot of money for, it's been running for quite a few years, it still runs, it works just fine, it gets you up the mountain, but it gets you to the campsite, but no further. It runs okay, it's not very fast. It really annoys you that it's only got 4 beds and you wish you could change the engine and you can't, right? So it's that kind of analogy for the kind of big monolith. Whereas if we look at an analogy, and sorry, it's all car related, it's my life. If we look at the kind of analogy we would use for a composable Mac stack, people say, well, isn't it just a load of pieces put together that you have to be a mechanic to? It's like, no. You don't have to be a mechanic. You now have to hitch a tow bar. You now have to do the kind of relevant integrations. But the main point is you get to the campsite, you can set up camp, but then you can drive somewhere else. You can experiment with somewhere else. You want to go further up the mountain, you can do it. The next year you come back and you go, you know what, that wasn't right for me. I need a much bigger trailer, or I need road tires on my truck. These are the things that you can do with the composable stack. I know it's a cheesy analogy, but it seems to be working. And again, if anybody's listening and has marketers to talk to, this analogy does work for people who are going, I just don't understand. And to your point earlier, Tim, I don't understand why I can't get the flexibility. Why are you talking to me about a 9-month program to build just another microsite? Why? Or I've just decided that I want to experiment pushing data out to our app, and the IT team saying, no, we can't do that. We'll have to employ a different agency to do that. With this way of thinking, you literally look at the vendors that will work with your existing composable stack. You work with your IT team to work out how you can integrate them, and then you write a roadmap for that integration and test it. Usually, and we'll come on to in a bit, you can do proof of concepts relatively quickly.
The thing though, and this analogy still works pretty well, the hump to get over to get this composable thing running is slightly higher though. It's not like you buy an RV and you're driving in 5 minutes. You
Exactly. And a
actually
bit
need
of
to know
learning.
how strong is my engine? Can it actually pull this thing? And
Yeah.
what do I need on my roof? Maybe extra solar panels just to be safe. So there's this little extra work that you have to get in and actually work through to get started. And this is always kind of the play you have between how cool and easy it is, but to get started, it is actually, will you see in another in next slides that it is actually easy to get started if somebody helps you.
Yeah.
But the mental investment is a little high. But then once you're in, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Right. And I always try to also give that point here because
I agree. I think
uh,
one of the problems that we've got in our industry now, particularly, and it surrounds actually the MACH Alliance, is that, and we had this kind of conference a couple of months ago, which was the MACH One conference. It's
yeah,
really interesting to see these huge organizations get up on stage and go, "This is so much better. This is such flexible opportunity to innovate, to do more things, to get to new markets." However, do not underestimate the integrations or the cost. It's not necessarily going to cost any less first time round. And I think that's one of the
exactly.
things that people get a little bit kind of tripped up on. However, total cost of ownership is obviously a lot lower because
Yeah.
you can do much more with it.
Yeah, and also things like your DevOps team is going to be a lot smaller. For example, if you use all these SaaS systems,
Yeah.
something wrong goes wrong there, you just point the finger and they'll have to fix it. It's not your problem. Like
Yeah.
we've had agencies we helped try to pitch to a customer with, where the customer had like 4 agencies to just do one site, and then plugging in Uniform, we could eliminate 3 agencies, which kind of they of course obviously didn't like. But that's the other side of the thing. The innovation is changing, and people that try to remain very sticky with their customers by doing the thing they have been doing for 15 years, they're
Yeah.
not going to survive it, right?
I think you're doing everybody a favor, and it sounds awful, but you're doing everybody a favor because you're forcing them into a more modern technology stack. So
Oh,
you're doing that to
definitely.
the agencies and you're doing that to the
And the
clients.
lovely thing is, this customer really wants to. And then you
Yeah.
see these agencies scrambling to stay sticky. And
Yeah.
you're like, come on, that's not the best for your customer. It's good for your wallet, obviously, but it's an interesting play to see happening.
On the last point on the slide is on that wallet point. So a few years ago, we saw this kind of rise in consumption-based pricing for a lot of the monoliths, and everyone, this is great, this is going to work, and it was horribly complicated. And the biggest frustration people had is that the way that consumption-based pricing really works is if you start to see massive value with the additional costs and the uplift in
Yeah.
traffic, customer speed, that type of thing. But of course, the monoliths struggle to do that. So with Composable, all the line items are there. You can see exactly what's performing. You can see exactly where you're getting your return on investment. And you don't mind paying a little bit more if you're getting a 50% uplift. You don't mind paying 5% more and a 50% uplift. So
Oh,
that's the other
clearly.
thing that I think is working. I'll shut up on this slide now. So just that's the kind of mentality of composability. But just really quickly, coming away from the terms, the terms that we use when we're being really techie. So I think you and I, we talk a lot about Mac.
Yeah.
And we talk about the kind of technology that sits underneath that. One of the things that tends to happen to me on the agency side is clients will then say, yeah, but I've got this legacy system that I really need to integrate with. And we go, yeah, we will. And unfortunately, I think over the last few years, a lot of people have said, yeah, Mac can integrate and do everything at the top, and then we'll try and integrate with your legacy system. So that's slightly different to having a composable mentality, which is I actually want to make the best use. And just shout out to Uniform, we've used you guys to integrate with legacy systems to lift and
Mhm.
shift away from that legacy system over time.
Yeah.
That's more of a composable mentality than it is saying we're just going to move to Mac.
And it's a safe path because it's not a big bang release, which makes it very interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just to kind of catch that terminology. So and again, this is kind of going to make a few people wince, I know, but this is the cycle, right? And I've actually put the DXP term in here, right? So again,
Yeah.
old slide, and some other people have seen this before, but every 3 years, you look back over the last 15 years, every 3 years, oh no, my tech's outdated. Oh, look, a shiny new CMS. Oh no, it doesn't do what I thought it was going to do. Oh, cool, we've got this thing called DXP now. Let's have a look at that. Huge drop off, huge disappointment, cost too much, too inflexible. So then let's look at this new thing. And people are a bit tired. People are a bit fed up with doing this thing every 3 years. So this is just, I know I'm stating the obvious, but it's just a kind of, if you've got to put yourself in the shoes of the people who've paid a lot of money. And then to your earlier point, Tim, this idea that if I'm joining a company for 3 years, and to help them migrate away, do I want to be, where in this cycle do I want to be? Well, you want to be in the place where it just shifts away from it, right? So this is our method. Cheesy slide. Actually, did it for the university a while ago. But what we tend to do is we go, right, here's all the things that really annoy me about the platform, and then we say, and here's my wish list. And then we used to go away and try and find one platform, one monolith, and got as close as we could, right? And it's
Exactly.
even saying it out loud now seems insane, right?
I've done these discovery phases, like a 3-month discovery, where we would just find another big one that kind of had the puzzle pieces slightly different. It's kind of fun that we actually made money on doing these things. It's crazy.
Well, the thing is, if I'm being honest, agency life, this is what it was like. I mean, we started an agency in 2001. And we became part of WPP, and then we became part of another organization, but it was the same mechanism until about 5 years ago. I reckon I started working with, I think it was Contentful in 2017 on a project. And
so
that was when I was
pretty early on.
Yeah. So just getting away from that, and just again keeping your head within the kind of mindset. So what tends to happen, and apologies to everybody who's hot on this term, you get a group of people and they go, yay, we need a digital transformation. And it's like a red rag to me, because it's basically means a big consultancy can come and charge a load of money and go, yay, let's do digital transformation. And I think
I've been that person many times.
Well, so have I, right? So we just want to call out, if you're going to do digital transformation, that's fine. Prescribe what it is and what you're looking at. If you're talking about total digital transformation, you are not replacing PCs on people's desks, their marketing campaigns, their branding, and all of their outbound. You're not replacing that. You're picking a particular window, right? So you're probably,
but you have to hire a Scrum trainer.
So
sorry, I just had to put it in there.
There's a whole lot of this, but I think it's just, if somebody says to you, right, if we're going to move from Monolith to Mac, let's do a digital transformation. There are other ways, and this is kind of what this is, right? So you and I, we've worked together on projects where we've taken a client from a Monolith to a Mac. One of the things we always say is try and make sure that your first test of your foray into Composable and Mac includes some of your existing infrastructure. Don't run a test in isolation. Then
Always
keep adding features. Yeah. So the aim of the exercise here is, over time, with no disruption to your services. And I'm not saying this is easy. This isn't like a magic wand. Integrations are hard, right? So if you're integrating with your existing monolith, it's even harder. Integrating even between things we know integrate well requires thought and effort. But to move from one monolith to another requires even more thought and effort, and just builds in a massive amount of risk. So include part of your monolith, include part of your program. That will also, taking the technology out of it, force you to include team members from the existing team, that you won't ostracize a team member because they only know about this particular monolith. You can say, right, you're the data guy. You're just the data guy. You're the DAM guy, the CMS guy, the content guy, the editor, the marketer. You're including those people. And I think it's a weird
huge thing. It's very important.
Yeah.
Like what you see in these kind of systems that you're outlining here is that you're kind of reducing the monolith to a place where domain data lives, and it just becomes a source.
Completely.
Right? And the people that are an expert in dealing with that domain data, they keep their job because they've been trained for 5 years on how to content edit something in the DAM or whatever. Even if it's not used for that anymore, they're still worthy to be in that whole family of people.
Absolutely. And you also give them the opportunity to learn about different ways of doing things. It means that if they're then comparing, one of the, we all know this, that when you compare a monolith CMS to a headless CMS, say, some clients will go, I don't understand the editing experience. They can't see the editor, the WYSIWYG editor, right? I know
I've
there's
not
been
seen one
fixes.
customer who understood it. I'm sorry, but I've not seen one success story with a headless CMS where they really understood what they were doing without some sort of preview or help from a developer.
Exactly. So the problem with moving straight from monolith to Mac without this bit in the middle, without this human kind of connection, is people are always going to be comparing apples with pears, and they're going to get very frustrated, and then they're going to go, you know what, screw it, let's just go to this other monolith and let's go for what fits the easiest. Whereas if you take it the other way on and you take them on this journey, they can start to see the advantages and understand the advantages of these different worlds. We've got a client who's recommended to us, again, this search opportunity, because they've started to understand this world. They've realized the opportunities, and they've even started looking up the technology themselves. So
Nice.
these are not technical people. This is great kind of examples of people understanding the art of the possible. And again, I'm a techie, right? I've been a CTO for 20 years. I absolutely believe that it's about the hearts and minds of the people that are involved. So again, it's a cheesy slide, but it's a good way of explaining real life projects. And again, this is taken from one you and I worked on, 3 years ago.
Well, and you know what? I've actually had incredible success with this model that you just showed here, where a customer was stuck with one of these monoliths for like 15 years, and the deploy was 48 hours for like a CSS change or a copy change. And it would always go wrong, like mid release, and they have to roll back. And then this customer said, yeah, but we're going to have to release every 2 weeks at least, because then we have this. He just wanted it. We didn't know why. But then we had this project where we decided, you know what, let's start small and just replace the front end at least. So the rest stays the same. So the monolith was here, and we just created like a little layer that became an API, made a front end. But they didn't want to wait for a year for the whole thing to be a new front end. So what we did is we actually redesigned the website, and we implemented the new design in the new stuff and in the old stuff. So the stakeholders would monthly, every sprint, see new designs. So, fancy new website. And then some pages would be incredibly fast, and others would be very slow. And they wouldn't really realize what is happening. But some pages were the whole new front end with the same design as the old one. And in about a year and a half-ish, the full front end was there. And then that back end could be attacked by adding something like Algolia and Cloudinary, or I think they probably had some other dam system. And slowly but surely, it goes to the third pillar where the monolith is basically gone.
Yeah. And I don't want to kind of do the kind of shameless plug, but one of the things that we do with you guys is when people feel that they're really stuck, we can migrate just a few pages. Their main, so you look at let's say you look at a 600-page website, and you go, well, actually, only 5% of those pages are heavily hit. So let's migrate those 5 pages through Uniform. We can hoover the rest through. And although we won't recreate those pages, and I think if I'd have tried to explain that 3 years ago to people, I think they would have got a little bit kind of sounds like it's going to break.
That's really hard to do. Right now, the tech is there. However, I do want to address one point about these, let's say, headless CMSs, right? Where the editing experience is actually different. It is really challenging for content editors to actually deal with that. So what is your experience there?
So it depends if you've taken them on the journey of a sort of content architecture piece. So if they're seeing their existing site, say it's a really big site, if they're seeing that as we've got all of these pages, then it's difficult. Whereas if you, like this diagram that we have here, if you've taken them partway on this journey, they start to understand this idea of what a good content hierarchy can do for them, how they can surface that content in different places. And then they start to have conversations around, well, actually, I'd really like to separate my content out in these kind of boxes, buckets, flows. And then you say, well, what's the best editing experience to support that? And then you look at some of the great content editors out there where you can say, well, actually, do you really need a page view to do a slug on a page that's going to go out to a news article? and to these other headlines. So
Mm.
generally you don't. What you really want to do is understand where it might end up, in which case you don't really want a page editor. So for the clients that really want a page editor, we use some pretty clever tech to give them those kind of page renderings, and you see it in preview mode. There's quite a few CMS systems that do that. For most of the clients that want to take advantage of a really good content hierarchy and that kind of dissemination of content in a really clever way, they're not so worried. We do, however, just sort of to complete that circle, we still have clients that it's fundamentally about their content editors, churning out content. And frankly, we've even got a couple of clients who are using headless WordPress on because of exactly that reason.
Oh,
That's the
wow.
system they feel comfortable with, right?
Yeah, that's still a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to shoot it down, but when you see it's what it's being used for, it's doing fine, right? It's not
There you
for
go.
basic content. When you're not really worried about content hierarchy, you just need the pages out. I don't like it because I'm a purist, but
Exactly.
I get why people would want that. But I do think if you can take people on the journey of what a good content hierarchy looks like, if you've taken them through some training around how to think about their content as ever living, and then being assembled in the future in different ways, then the content editing experience becomes less of a problem.
All right. Good to know.
Cool. So this always happens to us. We ramble on and
Oh,
run out
yeah.
of time.
Let's just go to the next slide and find the
so
next ramble.
I just it was actually just to kind of infer the point from before when I said look at the top of the composable stack, there are different things. One of the things that people sort of get stuck on is, well, how many times am I going to switch out my search? How many times am I going to switch out my payment gateway? How many times am I going to switch out my DAM? And generally that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about if you have a new market. I'm a big fan of connected experience. As you know, I'm a big fan of physical and digital.
Yeah.
I like retail sites where you've got to connect with the customer in store as well as online, on their phone, on their work laptop. I love that kind of world. I love the physicality of everything. You can see the rubbish behind me in terms of connected experience and IoT. So if you've got that world, and we were talking to a retail clients mainly this week. So if they've got a new opportunity with a clienteling app or a point of sale system, if you look at how you would have to integrate that with an old school monolith, that'd be a pain.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas if you look at it from a composable point of view, you're literally talking about adding on something that's already probably a SaaS platform. Usually when it's clienteling or POS comes with its own hardware, usually has an API we can integrate with. So you're talking about adding on something. You're not necessarily talking about swapping out the fundamentals. Of course, you can swap out the CMS if you need to, but it's not a plug and play, right? It's more plug and play than it ever was, but you can't just kind of magically swap it.
Well, you know what? You actually can, but this is not a uniform marketing tool here.
you can if you've done it with uniform.
You can actually think of it one step further, where in your CMS, you no longer compose pages, but you just store your domain data there. If you compose elsewhere, you can map the data to whatever you're composing, and then switching a CMS is actually easy. But that's a very different mindset that we're working with, but it's quite interesting.
I think we use this way of talking when we talk about flexibility for the actual tech, and is around customer engagement. So how can people predict what their next level of customer? If you're a B2B site, then chances are you're not going to have much innovation in the in-store experience, right? You're not going to have, you might have a few outlets and things like that. Whereas if you're a huge retailer, you don't know what the next device is going to come along and do. You don't know what the next point of sale system, you don't know whether your foray into in-store augmented reality is going to be a success or a failure. But if you want to try it, we've got, those huge HoloBlades. We've got clients who are using those. How can we make those part of the system so they're not just standalone? I hate innovation in a silo, as you've heard me ramble on, but now you can do it as part of your system without breaking your core platform. So that's all this slide really says.
But there's actually an example I could give that makes this quite tangible, where we used to work for a cosmetics company, and what they wanted to do during Corona is still try on lipstick, for example, in store, or hair coloration, but not go to a teller or ask somebody in the shop. And so they integrated like a little Google Lens thing, that would scan a product, and then Google would know about the product because we implemented a little microservice for Google to scrape. And then it would actually know the product and would open a little app that we made that talks to our own database with all the BIM stuff, all the products, and then actually shows you a makeup tutorial, and you can try it on live with the camera, and then buy it there, and then don't go to the lady behind the counter, but then just leave.
Yeah.
And that was like a project. And then the hardest thing was to figure out Google's way of giving metadata to a product page so it understands what you're scanning. That's like a month less.
Yeah.
If I didn't have a whole team, it would have been 3 days.
That's
That's
exactly it.
And I love it because it just became part of the ecosystem. It's not a siloed thing at all.
No, completely. No, and again, it's just to try and make the point that if you think your business doesn't need to innovate over the next few years, then maybe Mac isn't right for you, right? It's not right for everybody.
True.
So the only thing just to kind of mention when you're trying these tests and trials is whether you're doing a huge Monolith to Mac migration, you're doing step by step, or you're doing that kind of innovation like project on the side. One of the advantages that we're seeing, because you can spin up in the cloud, because it's SaaS, because you can use APIs, is the gap between your proof of concept and your MVP is much smaller. This is super nerdy. I'm well aware that I sound like a management consultant when I talk about this stuff, but it used to be the other way on. So people would get their UX and their prototype. So you go your discovery, you do your UX and your prototyping, which is generally lo-fi clickables. And then your proof of concept was really just to say, will the tech sort of work, right? So you take your main data fields, your main API connection, you plug it all together. That would be then a huge gap to get it to production ready so that you could go to MVP. What we're seeing now is it's sort of on its head, because the second you can connect to a search, or you can connect to a CMS, or you can present data in a particular format or use a particular tool, that's it. That's the way that it works. So although it's not a complete flat line between POC and MVP, there is definitely not the step that there was 5 years ago.
It's quite I've seen POCs being at like 70% maybe of an MVP. It's quite close.
Yeah. And I think that it also helps us with the terminology, because people used to kind of argue about, what's a prototype, what's a POC, what's an MVP. But now you can say, yeah, but my POC is going to be all of the functions. I'm going to be indexing everything and returning everything, and have most of your assets in the DAM, and I'm going to also do it all in the cloud. So you don't even have to give me a credit card detail at this point. It's all going to cost you pennies just to kind of test it. So that's the kind of world we live in. If my boss is watching, she's going to go, don't hold him to that.
Say these things, but yeah, there you go.
Okay,
let's move it on. We have I guess 10 minutes left.
Yeah, I mean, again, the only other things were really just headline facts. So just going back to that point around choice, just to hammer it home. If anybody's seen this was the kind of Martech 1000, or I think it started off as Martech 500. Now it's like Martech 3000, 4000, 5000. That's the Martech 9800, right? So you absolutely, businesses have the choice in all the, and I mean, it's so small you can't even read it on these slides, right? So there are enough vendors out there. And my argument for anybody that says, oh, it's too much choice, let me go back to a monolith, is would you go to one vendor to build you two entirely different products? I've used the Lamborghini here, but because it's another car analogy, but it would be insane if you went to a building merchant to build you the kind of pieces for your house and build you an engine block. It would be insane, right? So
yeah, and your sound system, like at the same time, like makes no sense.
And I think as soon as you start using the kind of human angle, it sort of works for people. The other one I was just going to hit on, and again, it's a bit of a wordy slide, but when we talk about no more need to re-platform, just to hit home this idea that if you then pick those vendors that are built to integrate, you know that you've got the flexibility and you can customize. You know that you've not got this single point of failure. And that's one of the things that's, I've had sleepless nights in projects all over the world where I'm just worried about a certain monolith falling over, or I can't get the developers, I can't get this particular skill set. So that's a big thing for me. The one that seems to resonate with most people, just speaking from somebody who's sort of trying to explain it, is this idea that you have no downtime due to updates. You're always on the latest version. This is a real mental shift. And I think one of the problems is people like you and me, we over techify it to start with.
Easy.
And I think we need to go, no. Just go back to your last 5 years, look at how much downtime you've had due to updates, how much cost and how much external agency cost. Now we're in a world where you're always on the latest version. So that's just a one to kind of, I don't know, hit home, I think, for us. Last, just sort of wrap up these they're basically just 5 bullet points, really. So these are the ones that we use quite a lot. So I just steal stuff from the MACH Alliance. I'm allowed to.
There you go. We still can
But
do that.
they kind of ran these incredible surveys, and in 2020 it was like 20% of people were suggesting that they should move to Composable. 20% of these kind of tech leadership of these 5,000 or plus employees, and then last year it hit 79%. It's this
That's
nuts,
crazy,
right?
right?
So you think, well, people are doing this all around you. If you're a tech leader, why would you not look at this world and look at the amount of people that are, again, go back to the job roles, look at the kind of the talent that we were talking about to start with. A lot of this it's not just the tech that's driving that. It's this kind of human need. Just a slide on, again, stealing from the kind of MACH Alliance's day. I took a few shots. I got a few of ours in there as well. But this idea that this is the world's biggest companies and the mid and smaller end. It's not just the big boys. It's not the guys who've actually done a huge digital transformation. So this
it's
just wraps.
mainly the mid-market that are starting to do it now.
I have to
Which is
say, I think they're
interesting.
more interesting. I genuinely think that the mid-market is a super interesting space right now, because they know how the advantage they can take. It's not like the big guys who are just looking for those margins and the survival of the next 5 years. The mid-market can really eat the lunch of the big guys.
However, what I think is interesting here is the mid-market will do it at a certain scale, but not at a crazy scale, right? If Amazon starts to do these things for their website, they probably are, but whatever other company, they will start to notice the extra scale also brings more interconnectability between these tools.
Yeah.
And they have to worry about the fact that they might be creating a Mac monolith, right? If you interconnect too deeply,
Yeah.
how can you then switch something out again? So there is a balance to be found at scale. And so maybe it's a good thing that mid-market is trying these things out, figuring out, hey, maybe this was too much. This is one integration too deep. Or my CMS now has 16 integration fields to all these types, but then I need another CMS. Am I going to do 16 integrations again?
Yeah, I have a speculative, completely speculative theory about this, which is the mid-markets can't employ thousands of team members to handle integrations.
Yeah, so they have to be innovative, right?
Yeah, and if you think about the Mac monolith problem, you look at where that, I better not say the names, but you look at where that's happened, and it's because they've hired hundreds and hundreds of developers to handle integrations, which means they formed their own inflexible processes.
Exactly.
And it's an in-house problem. So I think the mid-market is the really interesting space, because they also know enough that they can chuck out their agencies if they don't deliver, which means you get a comparison of how different people integrate these different vendors and these different pieces of software. And it means that your internal team has to be super smart and know when they're being, when something's not working. And I think you can't hide behind the old way, which is, oh, it's just not working. You can see exactly where it's not working now.
I love that. It's completely open. And Matthias from Valtech is actually sending us a lovely message here. Thank you, Matt. Nice to see you, man.
The Mac monolith. I've got one last thing just to shout out. A lot of this data, just again, it's partly a plug as well. The MACH Alliance we've mentioned quite a lot. They've got a lot of this research that I've mentioned today. There's a great report out, the 2022 report out. The reason I use this, and I wrap up with this, is it's got a lot of information in there that's really digestible for everybody in kind of marketing, CIOs, CTOs, but also the kind of the people on the ground who are just going to be using this stuff. So that's my little plug for the MACH Alliance, because I use a lot of their information. I think a lot of us who are ambassadors do. But a lot of the way that I'm talking today around the human aspect of it comes from this kind of data as well.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. Yeah, thanks, man. This was, I I love doing these slides where you normally do this in 20 minutes, and then I just interrupt you to make it an hour, and then we come up with fun stuff. I think that's great. It's good fun.
Yeah.
So other than plugging a little bit of the MACH Alliance, there's something you wanted to share, maybe where you work or what you want to have people check out? Is there
Yeah, so
anything?
I suppose my only suggestion would be that when we've talked a lot today about the different technologies and we've talked about the approach towards those technologies, the reason I shifted gears a little bit was to kind of focus really on the intersection of customer experience, behavioral science, thinking about different ways of approaching your customers. As I mentioned, a really great guy mentioned on stage this idea that don't focus on micro KPIs. So for me, it's this, we've got this kind of cool 5 companies within Lab Group, and we're able to tackle all of those. So we're able to tackle kind of your conversion rate optimization. We're able to tackle the behavioral science. We're able to tackle the corporate comms and ESG sort of comms. We're able to tackle really cool creative and connection to, just to shout out to a previous client, we were able to kind of hit, thousands of 16 to 24-year-olds to get data out of them about what they really wanted from their e-com experience, and then underpin it
Nice.
all with tech. So that's the, and I'm going to use the word and you can kill me for it later, but that's the kind of authentic approach to understanding customers that I was kind of after, and I think I'm sort of seeing in the mid markets and upper markets as well.
Yeah, I really enjoy the fact that the tech is out there right now to do those things for real.
Yeah.
Just like suddenly personalization is a thing you can just do because you
Yeah.
have the tools. And
We've done something with you guys as well. I mean, we took a behavioral science kind of demo
oh yeah, I remember
with
that. That's like a few months back,
Uniform.
right?
Yeah, it was a brilliant exercise. We use that exercise quite a lot to explain to people that you can portray the same content, but understanding the behavior of a user, profiling that user based on their behavior, and then rendering the page differently, not necessarily even the content, but just the way that you're presenting that page. Or
Exactly.
that
Like the
is
image is bigger or smaller, things like that, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that tech's out there, but it's just a case of not just getting wrapped up in the tech, says the techie.
Yeah, exactly. Same here. But you know what? Since that time, tech has changed again because now we're rendering these personalization things on the CDN edge
Yeah.
dynamically.
Yeah.
So you don't even need the JavaScript. And so that's a whole other story. So let's not get there. Not now. We'll have a beer once, and I'll show you some extra fun stuff.
Cool.
Anyways, thank you so much, and also thanks people for watching. If you wanted to talk a little bit more about Uniform, you can go to Discord by that link, or just go to that QR code. So, what is the URL for Lab, Matt?
Oh, lab.co.uk.
Easy as peasy. All
That's
right.
us.
Anyways, thank you so much, Matt, and yeah, see you in the next stream. Cheers.
See you later, buddy. Bye.